Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar session, The Power of Vision in Program Management, Actionable Strategies and Best Practices, with our presenters, Bill Loudon, Rocky Ellens, and James Carpenter. So my name is Kim Heyer, I'm with GP Strategies, and I'm happy to be your host for today's session. So before we begin, I just want to let you know that a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation today will be sent to you in a follow-up email within 24 hours after the session today. And as always, if you are new to GP Strategies webinars, even though everyone's lines are muted, we always want our time together to be as interactive and engaging as possible. So we encourage you to contribute during today's webinar. And if you have any comments during the presentation, use the chat feature to engage with not only our presenters, but as well as your fellow attendees. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A option. And then if we will respond to them at the end of the session, given time permitted. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us in our session today. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our presenters. Our presenters, James Carpenter has over 20 years of project and program management experience, specializing in agile program management. James ensures large enterprise initiatives achieve their full value, through expert organizational change management. James drives stakeholders engagement and change adoption for successful project outcomes. And our second presenter, Bill Loudon, is the Director of Business Consulting and has over 20 years of delivering solutions for Fortune 500 companies. He also specializes in defining and executing initiatives, programs, and projects that enable companies to achieve their strategic goals and objectives. Bill's an expert in program and project management, agile at the team level, and agile at scale. And last but not least, Rocky Ellens has a robust background in portfolio program and project management and specializes in strategic transformation planning and implementation, process improvement, and innovation pipeline creation. Rocky excels in integrating and enhancing business metrics, fostering customer experience management, and driving effective change management strategies. So I know you guys have a great session today, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to you. Have a great session.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you everybody for being here today. So as we move forward here, let me make sure I'm set to go. Yep, there we go. Just to give you an overview, we're going to share with you kind of leading with vision, then we're going to jump into alignment and execution and how we use that vision, and then we'll talk about innovation and adaptability. But again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and as I jump into the next slide, just give you a high-level view, right? So vision is a North Star, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you define that vision and how do you develop that vision? What are some things you could do to build that vision? And the next thing we're going to do is talk about, and then it aligns with the strategy of the organization. So how do we then take that and ensure that we're executing, as we're executing the program, we're always aligning back up to the strategic objectives of the organization, ensuring the program's delivering value. And then finally, Rocky's going to talk about innovation and adaptability and how we want to let the teams innovate and adapt as they begin to go and develop the solutions for the programs and the projects, all aligning back to that vision, if you will. So with that, I'll hand it over to James.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so as Bill mentioned, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the vision statement itself, and then Bill and Rocky will come over top and talk about what happens after you create the vision. So first of all, I'll just say that creating a vision does not happen by magic. It doesn't happen, by bringing a blank sheet of paper to a group of stakeholders and expect miraculous results. Instead, it occurs through rigor and preparation, which requires reviewing company strategic goals, business unit objectives, and individual aspirations of project team members, and of course, every key stakeholder that's involved. So understanding what the company and business unit is trying to achieve will better position the vision development exercise for success. So you should, at a minimum, be able to come up with some themes to bring to a workshop type session where key stakeholders can help craft that vision. It's going to be important to have structure for any vision creation activity. And this is really because, passions can get quite intense for key stakeholders, especially when significant change will result for any, big project, program, or key initiative that's out there. And it may not be an easy process, but it will be important to surface any differences of opinion, resolve resolve them in any final vision statement to ensure buy-in and alignment going forward. So what I want to talk about next is just what it is, what a vision statement is, more on what it does, and then actually give you an example of how to create it. So next slide. Oh, you got it already. Thanks, Bill. All right. So first of all, what is it? You know, a vision statement should be short, should just be a few sentences that summarize what an effort is expected to achieve and illustrates what the intended outcomes are. And it also should be about the future. So therefore, it should stretch our imaginations about what is possible. Again, as I said, visions aren't, usually easy to come up with. A mentor of mine, once would often ask a group in a visioning session when they created their first draft, is this painful enough? And the purpose of that question was to illustrate that any significant change resulting in a lot of value is going to be very, very hard work. So vision statements get argued over, they get debated, by all the various stakeholders. Later, they're going to get wordsmith tweaked to ensure that each stakeholder can see themselves in it and buy into it. So, and because of this hard-fought debate, these are not changed willy-nilly. And all the change that occurs in the world, in our projects, in our lives, these are meant to be beacons and anchor points for a project team, program team, initiative team. So they should withstand personnel changes, even major ones. So the team can soldier on even if leadership turnover occurs. So they really should try to stand the test of time. So what does a vision statement do? When a team or individual questions if they're working on the right thing, it serves as a beacon so they know that they are. It should be easily consumable and hopefully memorable so that the picture of the future is clear. Even when we don't exactly know what the end solution might be, at least we know the goals and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and the vision should illustrate that. Most of the initiatives that I've been involved in have heavy investments, both not only in dollars, but also in people's time and commitment. So the vision should aid in aligning everyone so that we stay focused on the right things, we're efficient, and we achieve the promised value. And then how you can use it? Well, it's not a one and done type thing. You don't have this big visioning exercise, put it in a charter document and walk away and put it on a shelf. It needs to be used in messaging and communication artifacts. And when all leaders speak, they should purposely weave the vision into their statements so that everyone knows it and they reinforce it. The vision can help with ensuring teams are working on the right things. If a team is not sure, they can always ask themselves, does this align with the vision? As an effort evolves, especially big ones, they might tend to deviate a little bit from the vision. So program and project managers can use the vision statement to help manage scope creep. So that's another way it can be used. And then lastly, it is a key piece of measures, metrics, and KPIs as they should lead up to the objectives and the vision statement. So vision statements should also feed any higher level strategic goals from a business and company perspective. So, and then just a little bit about, how you could go about creating a vision. And there's lots of ways to do it, but these are just kind of a one way that you can go about it. So again, I'll just say the warning again, you don't want to come to any visioning exercise with a blank whiteboard or a blank sheet of paper. You definitely want to come with a point of view. So it would just be too darn painful to get all these disparate key stakeholders in a room and get them to align on something. So, but it really does start with research. So you want to gather any related information about what is done before, look for similar strategies or vision statements related to the scope of your work. Look for higher level business unit and company goals. A vision must align both the initiative team as well as to the company goals. And then listen, interview key stakeholders, key influencers about potential future state. This can be done live, but you can also go back. A lot of companies have recorded calls from senior leadership. You can listen to those calls and see what their messaging is and see how that might help you with the visioning exercise. Ask what success looks like and document the feedback. Once you have that information, you can synthesize, look for patterns about what stakeholders said, where there might be divergence of opinion. Again, document that, but find themes. So distill patterns into themes and validate maybe with a trusted cadre of stakeholders to make sure that what you heard and synthesized makes sense and is true enough to continue the conversation. And then you can actually, put together some type of workshop type activity. So I talk here about doing a positive pre-mortem. Most people know what a post-mortem is. The patient died. So you try to find out what happened. In this case, a positive pre-mortem is a twist on that. We look into the future to when when the initiative is completed, and we imagine complete and total success, and then you ask the team to say, questions like, what led to that success? What were the outcomes that were achieved? And from that, you have them create what's called a future press release. So basically, a company or a magazine or a news organization wants to write an article about your great success. So they document a future press release. So you can use that future press release and find kind of distill out the key statements and help create a draft vision statement from there. And then the team can edit and wordsmith that. Once you have it, don't just put it on the shelf. You're going to want to use it as part of your messaging and stuff. So with that, Bill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Appreciate that, James. So real briefly, let's just ask the group, how do you use vision within your program? So if you would, jump in the chat and share with us a little bit about what you do. We'd love to hear about what you're doing today, how you're using vision in your programs and projects and initiatives, and what you're doing with it. Love to hear some of those insights. And so while you're answering that question in the chat, which would be great, I'm gonna keep moving us forward here, and we look forward to seeing some of that in the chat. So pulling up for a moment, just to anchor us, right? Organizations define their strategic objectives. And from that, right, they develop and set up programs and projects that will drive value and bring value to achieve those strategic objectives. And it's important that we have those connections. So if you're working in a large organization, they're standing up their long-term plan, they're defining those strategic objectives. As programs are coming out, it's important that you connect back to that. You make sure that that senior leadership team, you're staying connected with them. From that, then building on what James had said, right, the program has to continually reinforce those objectives, right? So as long as those objectives align back up to the strategic objectives, now the program objectives can be reinforced. And that vision can just continue to be reinforced as we go. The other piece is then, as we want to make sure as the program's starting to deliver on their solution, we want to make sure we validate that. Say, hey, is this solution actually moving the needle and bringing the value we expected? So we constantly check in with that. And then ultimately, right, we want to validate and say, hey, yeah, the program's achieved its aim. It's realized, it's not just implemented, but it's actually realizing the value that we were hoping to obtain from the program. And now the company's moving forward, achieving its strategic objectives. So kind of a big journey there, but that's at a high level what organizations tend to do, especially large ones. And so let's talk about this a little bit more in depth. So James talked about what it was like to build the vision, and he talked about, and I'll reinforce this here, right? We have to make sure that we're constantly engaging with our stakeholders and we're always communicating. This is, like James said, it's not a one and done. This doesn't go on the shelf. We use this all the time. This is something that we repeat through and through and through. And by the time candidly, we're probably, quarter of the way, halfway through the program, most people are like, okay, we get it. But we keep repeating it. We keep repeating it and anchoring back to it, right? And so it's important that those are clear goals and objectives, and the program goals are clear. And then we build what's called a walking deck. And this walking deck allows us to onboard people. It allows us to bring up a slide or two. Like James said, it's a simple one slide, or maybe it's two, but it always allows us to bring everybody back to what we're doing, why we're doing it, right? And so as we have that walking deck, it's a tool we give to leaders so they can talk to this. It's a tool they have in their back pocket that when they're in their meetings and program project manager's not around and they want to reinforce the message and make sure the vision's crisp and clear and everyone's on board with the journey and where we're going and the destination, they can use that. Obviously, if you're using OKRs or objectives and key results, they're a fantastic tool. It makes it very easy to connect the goals of the program or project to the goals of the organization. Not every organization uses them, but if you are, it's another thing we would put into the walking deck and make sure we're clearly aligned to those OKRs. So again, the intent is then you just reinforce. You cannot say the vision enough. You cannot get it out there with the stakeholders enough to make sure everyone knows why we're doing what we're doing and knows what we're doing, right? And so hopefully that helps. Right? We're out there as programs and project managers constantly reinforcing this, and we're constantly reminding our leaders to reinforce the message and bring the message forward all the time. So from there, let's talk a little bit about how the team now works. So I'm going to bring in Rocky here, and Rocky's going to talk to you a little bit about how the team then can work with that. So we've set our vision, we know why and what. Rocky, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, James. Yeah, you guys are spot on as always. Next, it's my job to take us on a short journey to examine how to enable your vision through innovation, adaptability, and continuous improvement. Next slide, please, Bill. First, I want to state that leaders need to establish a culture that embraces innovation. Hopefully, this sounds intuitive to you. When I use the term here, innovation, I am not referring to a well-funded skunk works department that only a few engineers ever get the privilege of working in. Rather, I'm referring to an environment that encourages and empowers teams as they work locally. It creates an opportunity to have the team solve their own problems in order to help achieve the program goals. Our team at GP Strategies has developed several tools to assist with innovation, and more about that in a few minutes. Let me first take a moment to share a personal story that I think will help you understand the role of innovation that it can play when crafting and executing a program's vision. I believe this story will also illustrate how the leader's vision may require the team to do their own innovating before goals and intent can be fully realized. I was a brigade commander in an Army Reserve unit tasked with mobilizing all National Guard and Reserve units from a 7-state region to support the Afghan war. The war had been going on for about 6 months. Early indications were that we were losing, on average, 1 soldier per day due to heart attack and what I'll refer to as muzzle awareness. I viewed this data as a avoidable non-combat loss of personnel in the Army. I explained this non-combat loss problem to my staff. To address the problem, I announced the new program vision by stating we were going to conduct a convoy live fire exercise that we would begin rolling out in 6 months. I timed it so that this training would roll out in the next, what we call annual training cycle. For those of you who are not familiar with the Army Reserves in the United States, it is built around a training cadence of 1 weekend per month and 2 weeks during the year. This extended 2-week period is designed to allow the units the opportunity to build experience with their assigned equipment while conducting their military occupational specialty, artillery, infantry, and so forth, in a field environment. Let me break this vision statement down for you a minute. Live fire exercise is a training event with live ammunition. It is high risk potential that could result in bodily injuries. Now, when you add convoy to this, it now means that you've got a bunch of people with live ammunition in a string of moving vehicles shooting at targets. I believe you can quickly imagine some of the dangers in this kind of exercise and therefore some of the complexities involved. Certainly my staff did. Their immediate reactions were, this has never been done before. It's too dangerous. We don't have enough time to put it together. It can't be done. I went around the room and gave each staff member a chance to respond, a chance to be heard. To a person, all feedback was negative, stressing why we couldn't or shouldn't embrace this vision. Taking a deep breath, I looked at each staff member in the eye and replied, each of you is right. I am asking you. I am asking you to do the impossible. It hasn't been done before. It is very dangerous. And 6 months, which is equivalent to 12 days in a reserve cycle, calendar cycle, it's a short time to pull this all together. But there's one thing that you all overlooked. One thing. That I believe is so important that it makes this process, that it makes this project a necessity, regardless of your valid assessments. It will save lives. You see, a vision is meant to be aspirational and to communicate intent, as James had said. This was not a slogan. For me, it hit me. It was what I believed in my core. It hit me at the core. But without the vision, your team will never be able to figure out how to get to the how. Innovation is often also needed to bring vision to life. Next slide, please. Having a culture of adaptability means you have a culture that equips and encourages change and innovation. A culture of adaptability will benefit from tools and frameworks that bring consistency and predictability to a world of chaos. GP Strategies has what we call a revamp framework that supports programs and provides an organized approach to help clients adapt to ever-changing conditions. It may feel a little like an oxymoron to use the words predictability and consistency in the same sentence as adaptability. After all, can you imagine a world where adaptability is consistent or even predictable? For me, such a world exists only when the culture and the mindset embraces change within. The work is within how the work is done versus viewing change as disruptive and something that happens to us. We often forget that there are three key stakeholder perspectives that need to be considered: the business, the employee, and the customer or the end user. I argue that most important of these three is the customer, because without a customer, we would not have a business at all. What can adaptability look like for a program vision? Back to my military story. If the decision criteria was limited to local resources, historical constraints, or even the standard mobilization training offered by the Army at the time, this convoy live fire would not have been developed. But when you dig into the end user's perspective, in this case, the deploying soldiers, you would discover that within 6 hours of landing into country, these soldiers were given a convoy brief. This convoy brief told them what to expect on their next leg of their journey. They were told to go to the supply room and draw 3 MREs, meals ready to eat. They were told to stop by the armorer and draw their basic load of ammunition. They were told to load their gear. They were told about the 2 to 6 hour drive through enemy territory. They were told where the likely hot spots were located along the route based on recent activity or intel. They were told to keep their eyes open for anything unusual. They were told how to respond to the enemy if they were encountered along the way. And then they were loaded into vehicles and their convoy journey began. They were expected to get it right the first time. Because if they didn't get it right, the results would be that someone was injured or even worse. You see, 2 to 4 weeks earlier, these businessmen and women sat in an air-conditioned office, ran a register in a department store, taught school, or maybe drove truck down some US highway making deliveries. Now they were soldiers sitting in the confines of a vehicle with at least 3 other people with loaded weapons driving through hostile environment at temperatures often above 100 degrees. If something goes wrong, there are no do-overs in this situation. In other words, we were imposing a significant change into the life of the soldier. Sure, they were Army reservists. Sure, they signed up for this possibility, but I will guarantee you that their monthly training regiment did not prepare them for this environment. They had neither envisioned this environment or practiced applying skills that would help them in this environment. Have you ever changed your employees' work environment? What level of support did you provide them so that they could be successful in adapting to this new change? My point of this military story is twofold. First, program plans will need to adapt over time. You will need to create a new vision, either because your team met the first goal or because they need a new North Star, or maybe even because the environment has shifted. Do not minimize, secondly, the amount of change that you're asking your team or your end users to go through. Can you assume with certainty that they will be able to get it right the first time out of the gate with the resources you provided them? The probability that your program will be successful will increase if you find a way to take your team and the end users on a journey to understand and build experience. If you do this, you will begin to build a culture of adaptability and resilience, which are muscles that they will need to face future challenges and change. Next slide, please, Bill. I've heard it said that the term continuous improvement can feel exhausting. That may be true. However, my position is that using the word continuous is more about equipping your team and your customers for change and embedding change into the way they do work, that therefore makes improvement continuous. Another tool GP Strategy has that will help you harness and scale experiments throughout the company is what we call the test and learn tracker. How much of your time do you allow the employee to experiment in their work? If you increased it by 2 to 5%, would that have a material impact? Now imagine for a moment, if you could build a test and learn factory, a factory that develops a consistent pipeline of new improvement ideas and experiments. How could these experimental insights benefit your business, your customer, and your employee? What if you had 100 potential experiments identified, 20 of which were being worked at any one time? Now assume only 10% of these experiments were successful and delivered improvements ranging from maybe small and incremental to significant. This doesn't sound like much, but consider the possibility if you could repeatedly harness this rate of improvement month over month over month. How valuable would the stacked impact of all these improvements be for your business after 12 months? This kind of factory would give every employee the opportunity to use a small portion of their time to conduct data-based improvement experiments within their domain. What could this look like in your organization? Where would you begin? GP Strategies Test and Learn Tracker can help. It starts by documenting the problem to solve. It records the experiment's intent and parameters. It identifies how to measure and evaluate success. It establishes experimental time frame. It logs the expected outcome hypothesis, and it provides a framework for prioritizing the experiments within the time cycle. To underscore the need for continuous improvement, I'll extend the military story one last time. We had the convoy fire, live fire exercise up and running during the traditional 2-week annual training. Our challenges were, one, our throughput volume was lower than demand. In other words, many more units were being deployed that we didn't have a chance to reach with this training. And secondly, we were also taking away valuable time that the soldiers needed to gain experience with their assigned equipment and their military occupational specialty in a field environment, which happens in the annual training. Does any of this sound vaguely familiar to your situation? Do you need your employees to continue with business as usual while they're transforming? I went back to my staff and I asked them, I gave them a new vision. We needed to find a way to safely provide the same level of training, but to do it in the drill weekend. I needed to reset our vision. My staff went back to the drawing board and came up with a solution. It took 2 iterations of experimentation before we landed on what I felt was the sustainable solution for both my team delivering the event and the units that were attending it. Now I'll give you the rest of the story. My staff was able to adapt to change with more speed and more success than our sister units throughout the Army Reserves because we embedded change and continuous improvement in the way we did work, which meant we could respond to change quicker. My staff moved from being risk averse to managing risk. After all, the Armed Forces mission is inherently dangerous. We broke down the tasks and incrementally added risk back in once we saw mastery was demonstrated, and we continued with our oversight. In effect, we were modeling risk management to the deploying units and their leaders. We recognize that good ideas can come from anywhere and anyone. Everybody was given permission to find better ways to improve. Over 35,000 people were mobilized. We lost 12 soldiers in 36 months. None of these casualties were physical fitness or muscle awareness. These deaths were tragic for sure, but the loss of life was significantly less in the units that we deployed with this training than those that didn't have the training. Lastly, I'm happy to state that this type of training is now standard and the standard training for all military Army Reserve units today. Does your company embrace a continuous improvement strategy? When you implement change, are you satisfied with the results? How would a data-driven test and learn factory help your company accelerate its vision, benefits realization? To wrap up, for this military program to be successful, I needed to provide a vision. I needed to communicate that vision effectively and often. I needed to give my team space to innovate to achieve that vision. As the team built out their plan, I needed to go up the chain of command to secure the requisite resources identified within my team's plan. How do you see your role in implementing change for your programs? Bill, I'm sending it back to you to bring us home.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you for your service and your story. Appreciate that. Hopefully everyone can appreciate then as we kind of go through this, we set the vision, right? Through that vision, we align it. We have strategic alignment through the organization. And then we get to the end of this idea of innovation and adaptability is we really want the team to determine the how, right? So we've got a why, we've got a what. We really want the teams to determine how they will achieve the strategic objectives or the objectives of the program, right? And how they go about doing that. And Rocky's story, I think, does a good job of highlighting how teams can be adaptable and innovative as they go to look to bring forward and achieve the vision that was set forth. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill, Rocky, and James. We have a couple of questions. I just want to be conscious of time. So we'll get through as many as we can before the end of today's session. I have a question here that says, you make a good argument that having a program vision is very beneficial, if not critical. In your experience, what is a common watch out when creating and executing a program vision? Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, James, if you don't mind, I think that'd be good for it's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest watch out is, we go through this enormous effort and energy to create it. And then it just gets put into a document and put on a shelf or on a server somewhere. And we don't weave it into our normal messaging. We don't weave it into leadership communications, and it gets forgotten. And I think somebody else commented about, hey, in our company, we see our company's vision and our, onboarding, but after that, it kind of disappears, So I think that's the biggest watch out, is to ensure that you follow it up with, change management plan, communications plan, to make sure it's woven in there and people are checking on that. And I think as a program manager or project manager on these large initiatives, it's really on you to make sure that work stream, that overarching work stream around communications is happening. So I think, Bill, you had a nice artifact that Becky had that you take that would help support that.
Yeah, no, of course. So we do put together a stakeholder management plan that focuses in on different targeted messaging that we want to make sure that goes through with everyone. And then we build that walking deck based on what different comms have to be communicated. And we really want to enable our leaders to have those conversations. And to your point, James, right? We want to make sure that we're partnering with those leaders and we're there with them, helping them, ensuring that the vision continues to be communicated throughout. So I'm with you there on that for sure.
Yeah, I just add one more thing. I mean, we were working with some years ago with a major retailer, and they were transforming. It wasn't Amazon; they were getting pummeled by Amazon. But because you brought up onboarding, they had to modify their onboarding journey for their new employees, and so we armed leaders with what we called an elevated storyboard, and it was just a one-pager, a sheet of paper. This is back when I still went to people's offices. That they would take with them, and they would tell the story from this elevated storyboard, and it was clear what the vision was and how we were going about achieving it. So,
great. Did you have anything else to add on to that? I do have a couple questions. Yep, ready?
Oh.
Okay. So there's a question: why does my program vision need to be aligned with the enterprise business goals?
Oh, well, I think for that one, James, you don't mind, I'll start, and Rocky, feel free to jump in. But I mean, again, the programs, everything we're doing should be aligning to the goals and objectives of the overall organization. Once we kind of go sideways or away from that, then are you really working to help the leadership of the organization, the company, achieve their goals and really drive value into the organization that they're really investing in your programs and projects to deliver? And so it's important that whatever we do when we're establishing a program or project, we can align it back up. The other thing that's nice about it is it allows us, when we walk in a room as a program manager, cross-functional team, never, you haven't really worked with a lot. You might know them, but you haven't really worked with a lot of people before. It's very nice to show up and say, hey, here's what we're about to go do. Here's why we're doing it. And oh, by the way, it's also what our CEO just talked about last week. Oh, by the way, it's what our CHRO just talked about last week, right? It's nice to be able to align back to that, and it gives some gravity, if you will, to what you're bringing forward, and it shows the importance of the program or project you're working on. It really helps to add some interest there, if you will, from various stakeholders. James, Rocky, I welcome you to jump in as well.
I'll just say that, we talk a lot about programs, projects, and initiatives, and that's kind of the point of this, but it's also like your everyday work. I think you're maintaining value of the company. That should be reflected in the overarching company goals and objectives. And then we're also trying to increase value of the company or organization. And, that's mostly what we're talking about here, but I think it works in both spaces. So again, if you're not aligned, if what you're doing is not aligned to what the company's trying to achieve, then what are you doing? Somebody might ask you a question about that. So, yeah.
It's a question of relevancy, right? Have you lost your relevancy if the program no longer has line of sight to the business goals?
Yeah. Good questions, Kim. Thank you.
Okay. I have time for maybe 2 more questions. So let's, here's a question that, does a program vision need to be associated with a burning platform?
Let me take a jump at that, because I think this addresses Hamad's question of what is the most important, or what is the most difficult that you run into with persuading teams to change old styles to new goals, right? So I think the answer is yes. And the reason for that is that gives the why we need to change, why we need to transfer. And it does so in a means that can stick with the people. If you get common alignment on the why, then I think the probability is more apt to land. So a burning platform is important. It's very difficult sometimes to find the right burning platform, but once you get it, you have really gone leaps and bounds further than you would have without one.
I would say, think about a large software implementation in a company. You got funding for that, right? There's a lot of money around, new software, but is it really the technical solution that's the difficult thing? It's probably not. It's probably the people adopting that, and doing process change and all that kind of stuff. So I think if your burning platform is a way to be funded because you're buying new software, then fantastic. If you can link up to that and then weave change into your organization and achieve a higher strategic objective, I think that's good. So sometimes it's a means to an end, and if you can align it, great.
Great. Bill, you have anything to add, or anybody else? We are at time, so I wanted to be conscious of that. No? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the great discussion, and a big thank you to everyone who's joining us for your time and attention. At the end of the session, we do ask you to take a minute to fill out the survey. We do appreciate your feedback, and we take it very seriously. So we hope that you'll join us again for another upcoming webinar. Please visit GP Strategy's website for future sessions, and I wish everyone on the call today a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye now.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.